You are about to listen to the words of Fethullah Gulen, a distinguished Islamic scholar and thinker. In this podcast, you will hear his essay, Travelers to the Light.
Travelers to the light are the ones who have always endeavored to surpass mere corporeality. Apparent in the way they have lived has been a determination to bid farewell to lowly feelings. Focusing on their heart at all times, they have hastened to enjoy the horizons of their soul. They have always turned away from their own shadows and marched toward the source of all lights. During an inauspicious period when the masses suffered separations one after another and succumbed to darkness, when societies were stranded and stunted, people lost hope and were diverted from the path, these travelers to the light essentially taught all exhausted travelers the qualities and conditions of being privileged as the best of creation. They invited the weary to self-respect, rousing the eyes and ears of those who had stopped walking on the path and promising resurrection to lifeless hearts. Thanks to their character with deep qualities and capacity to represent their values, over time, the abyss between where we are stuck and where we should be has become nothing more than a smooth plain. The seemingly insurmountable peaks have turned into highways. Vast oceans became crystal clear waterfalls. The travelers to the light led the stricken, hopeless souls towards the horizon of light beams. The travelers to the light were created from dirt and clay too. However, after spiritual transformations, they took wing in tandem with the creatures of light. They lent their wings to those in their environment so they could soar towards the peaks of annihilation in God, Fanafilah, and subsistence with God, Bakabilah. These are realms with no element or quality. Leaving their corporeal edifice a step behind and finding their metaphysical profundities far better, they ascended toward the inexplicable realms where angels welcomed them with greetings of peace and cheers of support. Almighty God, with His divine will, majestic might and power, perfect favor and profound compassion, reciprocated their step toward Him with miles of proximity, bestowing innumerable favors on them for their turning toward Him, even if they just turned an inch. He conferred on them boundless divine favors in return for their loyalty. He replied to their love and affection, regardless of how limited they were, with His infinite and boundless kindness. He poured upon them favors that no eye has ever seen, no ear has ever heard, and no mind has ever imagined, so much so that the travelers to the light ebbed and flowed between amazement, hira, and stupor, Haman. They couldn't think of leaving that atmosphere even for a while. How could they, when they always had an eye far beyond the horizons, when their hearts beat with eagerness for infinity and their emotions burst forth with the joy of love? Of course, as they ascended to the inexplicable peaks in heavenly realms, they, having conferred all that pertains to the carnal self, to the nervous system and emotions, were filled with a profound sense of humility, modesty, and awe, and each was inversely proportional with their spiritual status. Sometimes they sobbed and said, "If the all-merciful one weighs my sins as they are, I fear the scales on the day of judgment will break." Sometimes they thoroughly criticized themselves. "I glanced at the universe's book of deeds. I have not seen any account with as many sins as mine." As opposed to these blessed seekers of truth, who run from one peak to another while still dedicated to the truth, there are also ill-fated, ever-shackled slaves of lust, fame, pomp, show, and power, following Satan and his posse. Since they have turned away from servanthood to God, they have gone after countless idols. Besides losing the hereafter, they have turned their world into hell in unbearable stress, angst, and paranoia. They have lived with the fear and worry of losing all they have acquired, and by fabricating whimsical foes, they have engaged in fighting them overtly and covertly. They have spent their power and strength on tyranny, injustice, domination, oppression, aggression, and molestation. They have stooped to the position of being more evil than the most damned tyrants. Within the constant cycle of historical recurrences, the slaves of pomp, power, reign, and fame have always displayed parallel attitudes to one another. They have all resorted to similar tricks, fooled the masses with similar conspiracies, and eventually fell into a pit of their own digging. How nicely Shaykh-ul-Islam Ibn Kemal puts it, "Do not hand over a pickaxe to your carnal self, lest you dig a pit on anyone's path. If you do dig a pit on someone's path, you will be the one who will fall into it head first." With no exception, the arrogant, egotistical bullies of the past perished in similar finales. Surely today's fanatical and delirious tyrants who disregard fairness, common sense, rights, and justice will meet the same end in the very near future. In contrast to them, the radiant faces who are directed towards the right course always see the truth, think accurately, and strive to deliver others toward the truth. They lend a saving hand to those tripped and dragged by Satan. By showing them the signs along the road, the radiant souls inspire the shaken ones, orienting them toward the light. It is their indispensable wish to save those on the wrong path from the oppression of falsehood. It is their mission to deliver them to the joyous climb of truth and justice, hence crowning their lives with the sentiment and ideal of letting others live. No matter how dark days may turn, what distress weeks may bring, or what months may start and end in oppression, the radiant souls smile towards the future, believing the night is always gravid with joy and sorrow. See what emerges from the womb of the night before the daybreak. They walk on toward that sacred destination that is the object of their wishes and say, "Every night has its dawn, every winter has its spring." They walk on by seeing each trouble and predicament as a font of purification, heedful that domination and tyranny are two inseparable trials placed on the path of prophets. Aware of walking towards infinity and turning down worldly offers, they walk toward eternity and reach beyond the world where the splendors of infinitude are apparent. They do so already intoxicated by way of contemplating the beyond. May God bless the diligent travelers of this path thousands of times. Shame on the futureless, miserable tyrants who want to turn them away from this path.
You have just listened to the words of Fethullah Gulen, brought to life through an AI-generated voice. Known for his teachings on faith, interfaith dialogue, peace, and education, Mr. Gulen also inspired the Hizmet movement, a global initiative that promotes democracy, human rights, equality, and nonviolence. To learn more about Fethullah Gulen and the Hizmet movement, visit fethullahgulen.org.